Sweet abuse 1v1, double crazy batch, caution. Pei Yi is a top-notch fast-wearing expert, who was tasked with changing ties to save the villain system in the face of danger. As a result, everyone is a stubborn and clingy demon. The blackened tyrant imprisoned her in his arms and said, "Don't try to escape, you will always be my canary." Consort Pei Yi said, "It's possible to walk with your kidneys, but it's impossible to walk with your heart. No matter how big the stage is, it's not as brilliant as my sister's. I just want to sing for you," she said, forcing her to the corner. Jean Zhu Pei Yi said, "Be good, dating is not as important as making money." The black chemical bully held her face and whispered softly, "Don't disappear quietly anymore, I will really go crazy." Orphan Pei Yi said, "I don't want to leave either, but your dad smashed me with money." The love brain system is heartbroken and says, "What a great opportunity. Why don't you seize it?" Pei Yi's innocent face said, "Do you still need to grasp the man who is leaning against him upside down? System. There's no such thing as taking orders in the face of danger, it's clearly premeditated." Novel keyword. Let you save the villain, and you made him cry again. No pop-ups, let you save the villain, but you made him cry again. Download the complete set of TXT, asking you to save the villain, but you made him cry again. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Black Tyrant's Cage. Sparrow 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Black Tyrant's Cage. Sparrow 1. If you can't save her, you all have to bury her. After roaring, the vast palace fell silent for an instant. The imperial physicians knelt to the ground, their faces turned to ashes, and their bodies trembled like sieves. Behind them, the bodies of the slain imperial physicians have all been piled up into a small mountain, and the air is filled with a nauseating smell of blood. The atmosphere inside the hall is extremely oppressive. Just as everyone was preparing to die, the woman who had already died suddenly coughed. Yun Chen stepped forward and pulled open the bed curtain, facing the sickly beauty on the bed with 4 eyes. As his gaze met, Pei Yi covered his sore neck with a bewildered expression and said, "Who are you?" She caught a glimpse of the bloody corpse on the ground in her spare light, and was immediately frightened and panicked. "Dead, dead." Pei Yigong spoke up, and Yunshe suddenly grabbed her wrist and pulled her in front of him. Her sharp and dangerous pupils, like eagles and falcons, were filled with anger and suspicion. Playing with loneliness again, amnesia. His breath enveloped her like a blanket. Pei Yi was forced to look at him level, her beautiful little face incredibly pale, her eyes full of fear and confusion, her body trembling desperately, and her speech stumbling and stumbling. "I really don't know you." After speaking, her eyes turned white and she tilted her head and fainted. Yun Chen always held on to her tightly, and the imperial physician behind him immediately stepped forward to examine her. Then he said cautiously, "Your Majesty, Empress Yi has fainted. I have eyes alone." Looking at her peaceful sleeping face, a fierce and dangerous smile suddenly flashed on Yun Chen's face, and he let go and let her fall. Immediately after, a deep and pleasant laughter overflowed from his throat. "Since I am determined to die, I will fulfill your wish." Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly turned around and picked up the blood-stained long sword on the ground, slowly approaching the bed with it. Upon hearing the commotion, Pei Yi instantly opened her eyes and curled up in the corner, tears streaming down her face as she looked at him. "Don't kill me, I really don't remember anything." Cry whenever you say it, crying like a pear blossom with rain, tears are like broken pearls that cannot be contained. Watching Yun Chen approach closer and closer with his sword, Pei Yi suddenly stepped forward and hugged him, tiptoeing and forcefully kissing him. The scene fell silent in an instant. All the palace attendants and imperial physicians immediately knelt down and dared not look up. In order to survive, Pei Yi tried her best to kiss him with all her strength and cursed while kissing. "Garbage system, almost caused me to gag." The system waved helplessly and said, "How did I know that the original owner had already installed amnesia? There's no way, I'll just grit my head." As compensation, I have already repaired your body Pei Yi. Thank you. She is not a person from this world, but a fast-wearing taskmaster whose mission is to save the villain who has been sanctioned by the male and female protagonists for blackening. And Yun Chen is the villainous tyrant of this world. Pei Yi was not in this department before and had almost no love experience, so her kissing skills can be described as a mess. But the tyrant surprisingly benefited, releasing his long sword and backhand, he pressed her into his arms and easily lifted her into the air. Upon receiving his signal, the group of personnel immediately retreated and dealt with the horrifying scene. Put her on the bed, and before she could react, a familiar yet unfamiliar aura surrounded her. Yun Chen stared straight at her face, with a strange water light flashing in his eyes. The scorching gaze made Pei Yi's scalp tingle, only then did he notice his blood-stained lips, and he lowered his head with a guilty expression. Looking at me. Yun Chen suddenly pinched her chin, forcing her to look at him, his eyes dim and unclear, as if he was exploring something. There was no other way, Pei Yi could only grit her head and look at him. Her wet eyes were extremely innocent and she said, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to kiss you just now, I was just too scared. When my brain was hot, suddenly." "You're not sure Chang'e," he stared at her with a sinister and dangerous expression, his tone very determined. "Who are you, Shi Chang'e?" Faced with his sharp gaze, Pei Yi instinctively swallowed his saliva and then forced herself to lie, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Is Shi Chang'e my name?" Yun Chen did not answer her question. His black eyes, like those of a falcon, stared fixedly into her eyes, as if trying to penetrate her heart with terror. Pei Yi's scalp was numb from his gaze, and he instinctively bit his lips, fearing that he would directly reveal his identity. "How do I feel like you're about to be exposed? What else can I do? I can't say I'm the one sent by heaven to save him, can I?" Yun Chen suddenly curled his lips and a hint of mockery flashed through his eyes before responding, "Yes, your name is Shi Chang'e, you are my lonely wife. Are you my husband?" Pei Yi's eyes lit up and she immediately became suspicious. "Since you are my husband, why are you so cruel to me? I'm very unhappy because you did something foolish." In his words, he had already let go of her freedom and looked at her from a high position, his eyes becoming increasingly dim. His aura was too penetrating, and Pei Yi seemed to be intimidated by him. His eyes were instantly wet and he said, "I'm sorry, husband. I know I was wrong. Don't be angry anymore, woo-woo." Yun Chen didn't expect her to be so casual, her eyes darkened, and she calmly shook her sleeves and left. He walked so fast that Pei Yi didn't even notice a faint black figure standing behind the screen. After confirming that he had walked away, Pei Yi breathed a sigh of relief and collapsed directly. The brain quickly passed through the plain information. The tyrant Yun Chen is rumored to have killed his father and usurped the throne when he was young. He used extremely cruel methods to stabilize the country, and his emotions were unpredictable. His greatest hobby in life was killing. Perhaps he killed too heavily and was punished by the heavens. He could only sleep peacefully by his original owner's side. The original owner was extremely afraid of him and tried every means to finally commit suicide. After her death, Pei Yi naturally took over this body. As is well known, before becoming a villain, there will always be an unknown and very bitter past, and blackening is not what they want, thus giving birth to the system of saving villains. As the host of the system, Pei Yi will lead the villain onto the right path, avoiding his fate of being killed by the male and female protagonists after his blackening. It is obvious that Pei Yi arrived late, and Yun Chen had already turned into a tyrant. Just as Pei Yi was getting ready to get out of bed and walk, the tyrant suddenly entered again. He took off his outer robe, which was originally covered in bloodstains, revealing his inner clothes. It looked really eye-catching, but the fierce pressure was also really frightening. He lay directly beside Pei Yi, grabbed her with his long hand and tightly imprisoned her in his arms, sniffing her unique sweet breath and taking a deep breath. Pei Yi's head was pressed against his chest, and as he listened to his vigorous and powerful heartbeat, his cheeks burned red and he felt embarrassed. Tong, are the villains so direct? What should I do next, just take it off or get intimate first? The system was immediately stunned. During its trance, Yunshi suddenly grabbed her restless hand and whispered with his thin lips in her ear, "Don't make a fuss, go to sleep." Pei Yi felt disappointed and said, I thought there might be some inappropriate scenes for children. System. She didn't know that in her blind spot, the tyrant's ears had already turned red. Hello everyone, this is Sang Sang Z. The new book has finally arrived. Is the big guy still there? QAQ. The new book is delicate and requires everyone to take care of it together, so I am planning to organize an activity. Everyone, please comment and vote. From next week until the end of the event, I will draw small rewards from the top 3 of the activity list every week. Remember to join the group, dear friends. The group number is placed in the comments section. Love you all, Jumi. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Black Tyrant's Cage. Sparrow 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Black Tyrant's Cage. Sparrow 2. Early morning. Pei Yi was awakened by the heat, as if she was in a hot furnace. When she opened her eyes, she saw Yunchen's handsome and incomparable face. She licked her lips and her long eyelashes drooped down. The senior said that men like well-behaved and gentle women. A man who has turned black should also enjoy this taste, right? With this thought in mind, Pei Yi let out a breath and stayed quietly in Yunchen's arms like a doll. Even if it was so hot that he was sweating all over, he didn't move a bit. When Yunchen woke up, he saw her in his arms and a hint of playfulness flashing in his eyes, but soon replaced by indifference. He was like a heartless man, letting go of Pei Yi, sitting up to dress and tie his hair, and then walked out of her sight. Pei Yi, who witnessed everything throughout, said, No, it's not. Are you leaving after sleeping? Not saying a word. She was about to catch up when a group of palace attendants suddenly pushed open the door and entered, grooming and dressing her up. Pei Yi had no choice but to give up for now. After finishing breakfast and having lunch, Pei Yi finally hoped for someone to come, but not a tyrant, but a man in black. He wore a mask, his eyes cold, and his voice devoid of any warmth. Madam, your majesty, please. Pei Yi was momentarily taken aback, then asked him, Empress. Are you calling me? The man in black nodded lightly and said, Yes. Pei Yi. Let's go then. In no time, Pei Yi was taken to the imperial study by him. There was no one inside, and the desk behind the screen was filled with memorials. The air was filled with a pleasant scent of sandalwood. She was about to ask something when she turned around and saw the tyrant walking in. His face was not very good, his eyebrows furrowed slightly, and a very oppressive chill permeated his whole body. Yunchen walked straight towards her, his eyes slightly red with a hint of hostility. He seems to be in a very bad mood. Pei Yi blinked her eyes, then leaned over and whispered to him, What's wrong with you, husband? Her gaze was very pure, devoid of any emotions other than concern, as pure as a gemstone without any impurities. Yunchen lowered his eyes and looked at her, only to find that she was no longer afraid of him. His thin lips unintentionally curved a small curve, and his voice was low and magnetic. It's nothing. Really. Pei Yi looked at him without any concealment, and his gaze finally fixed on his blood-stained hem. Suddenly stunned, did you kill someone again? Her tone was firm and straightforward, not afraid that Yunchen would blame her for it. Thinking of her own task, Pei Yi immediately put on an old and stern cut and continued, It's not right to disregard human life. Your behavior, husband, is very bad. You need to change it. Upon hearing these words, the system was immediately dumbfounded. Host, he's a tyrant. Villain. Tyrant. Are you afraid of losing his head when you say that? Pei Yi didn't take it seriously and looked up at him, still smiling brightly. Do you think he's angry like this? Yun Chen pursed his thin lips slightly, his expression calm, and his obsidian-like eyes exuded a chilling and captivating radiance. Not only did he not feel angry, but there was also a hint of laughter in his eyes. He leaned forward in front of her and spoke in a low, gloomy voice from his thin lips, "But all the people I killed were bad people. Don't they deserve to be punished for their debauchery and plundering of the people's gold, silver, and food?" Ah! Pei Yi hesitated for a moment before answering seriously, "Damn it, but it's too cheap for them. Rather than killing them with a single blow, it's better to torture them to the brink of despair and make them completely regret what they have done." Her eyes were bright and clear, speaking the cruelest words in a pure and harmless tone. Yun Chen clearly did not expect her to say so. He was stunned for a moment, and the chill lingering around him completely dissipated. He nodded at her and said, "It makes sense." The system widened its eyes in disbelief and said, "I didn't expect you to be such a person." Upon hearing this, Pei Yi blinked her eyes innocently and said, "Ha, I never said that, I'm a good person." Upon receiving his affirmation, Pei Yi smiled proudly and then pulled him down, his bright eyes shining with pure and harmless light. She propped up her chin with one hand and looked at him with a smile, "Husband, you look really nice. Can you tell me how we got to know each other?" Staring straight at her, Yun Chen's eyes rolled with a dark and obscure light. He reached out and pulled Pei Yi into his arms, telling the story of his encounter with the original owner. In the end, there was a hint of grievance between Yun Chen's originally gloomy eyebrows. "I treated you very well, but you didn't hesitate to take poison and commit suicide in order to escape from me." "I poisoned myself." Pei Yi put on an incredulous expression, "Husband, you look so beautiful. How could I not like you? I must have had some brain problems before, but it's okay. I won't run away again in the future. Husband, can we join hands with Bai Tu?" Her eyes were slightly moist, and her bright little face showed an extremely serious expression, as if taking an oath, which made the tyrant smile and bend his eyes doting on her with deep affection. He said, "Okay, if you want to leave me again, I'll kill you." There was a strong sense of danger hidden in the seemingly indulgent words, and Pei Yi felt something was not right. However, she still forced herself and nodded playfully, pretending to be very obedient. After a brief conversation, Pei Yi finally learned the reason why he called him over. That's to sleep with him. After lying down, Pei Yi lay on top of him and felt the bruises in his eyes with a soft voice, "I'm sorry, husband. It's all my fault for not resting well." Yun Chen closed his eyes and spoke softly, "It's okay, just catch some sleep now." Pei Yi said, Husband, please go to bed quickly. I won't disturb you anymore." Yun Chen hugged her and quickly fell into deep sleep, almost instantly falling asleep. After confirming that he was asleep, Pei Yi rubbed his chin and murmured, "This body is really his sleeping aid system." Yes, otherwise why would the original owner go crazy after he dies? As an emperor, I am busy with government affairs every day and cannot fall asleep smoothly. Whoever goes crazy is better. About an hour later, Pei Yi woke up leisurely, and in front of her was the handsome and unparalleled appearance of the tyrant. I have to admit, he looks really good, with delicate and upright facial features, perfect facial contours and lines, and handsome. Just as Pei Yi was mesmerized by it, an untimely voice suddenly came from outside. "Your Majesty, General Shi is requesting an audience." Upon hearing the sound, Yun Chen instinctively furrowed his brow. After a moment, he got up and walked out, with Pei Yi wearing a robe and following closely behind. When Pei Yi arrived, he happened to break into two gazes. Shi Changqing looked incredulously at her unfinished robe and frowned in a Chinese character. "Changyi, how could you be like this?" He didn't finish the rest of the conversation, only because Pei Yi suddenly looked at him in confusion, his eyes clear, completely devoid of the dependence on him as before. Pei Yi stared at him for several seconds before realizing his identity. Shi Changqing, the male protagonist of the original side. That is to say, the person who ultimately killed the villainous Tyrant. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 3. The current male lead has not yet met the female lead, which means he is temporarily loyal to the villain. Thinking of this, Pei Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to answer, the tyrant's cold voice came to her ear. "Ai, come to me." Upon hearing this, she immediately obediently walked to Yun Chen's side, only to stand firm when he suddenly pulled her into his arms, causing her to quickly embrace his neck. Upon seeing this scene, Shi Changqing's eyes instantly turned red and he said, "Your Majesty." He was so angry that he shivered all over and gritted his teeth, saying, "Chang'e is still young, I hope you take it seriously." In the original plot, the male protagonist's hatred towards the tyrant stems from his sister's death. So as long as she doesn't die, the relationship between the male lead and the villain won't deteriorate. Pei Yi quickly kissed the tyrant on the cheek, then turned around with an innocent expression and said, "I like your Majesty, so I don't need him to be arrogant." Shi Changqing. He took a cold breath and stumbled several steps back, completely unable to believe everything he saw. Ignoring the distinction between monarchs and ministers, Shi Changqing approached and asked, "Little sister, aren't you happy with Lin Yishu? Why and why now? Why kiss your Majesty in front of my elder brother?" He found it difficult to speak the rest of the sentence, and his face turned red from holding it back. Lin Yishu. Pei Yi blinked her eyes and looked at the tyrant. She gently pulled his sleeve and whispered in his ear, "Who is Lin Yishu? An insignificant person." Yun Chen hugged her waist tightly, his voice deep and hoarse, with a lazy ending that sounded like a demon's whisper. Pei Yi nodded in confusion and said, "Oh, that's it." Looking at the inexplicably pleasing men and women in front of her, Shi Changqing finally realized something was wrong, and her eyes became extremely complex. After hesitating for a long time, he finally spoke in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, what's wrong with Chang'e?" He wanted to pull Pei Yi away from the tyrant, but due to his identity, he dared not step forward, so he could only endure his worries and wait for a reply. Yun Chen lifted his eyes and glanced at him, his narrow eyes slightly narrowed, with a playful and contemptuous tone. "As you can see, she has lost her memory." "What?" Shi Changqing gritted his teeth, suppressing his anger, saying, "Your Majesty, what exactly happened yesterday?" He only met her the day before yesterday, so he was certain that something he didn't know happened yesterday. Yun Chen was a bit angry, only slightly furrowing his brows for Pei Yi's face. His voice was extremely dangerous and he said, "Shi Changqing, didn't I treat you too recklessly?" The warning words instantly calmed Shi Changqing down. He suddenly felt a chill in his spine and quickly knelt down on one knee, clasping his fists with a solemn expression. "I will not cross over. Please forgive me, Your Majesty." Yun Chen watched him quietly, his black eyes deep, cold and dangerous. "Get out of here now. Your Majesty will comply with the order." Shi Changqing was suffocated by his invisible pressure and had no choice but to obey orders to leave, even the initial report had to be temporarily put on hold. After he left, Yun Chen suddenly pinched Pei Yi's jaw, forcing her to face his own 4 eyes. Facing the tyrant's pitch-black eyes, Pei Yi blinked in confusion and spoke vaguely, "What's wrong?" Her hands were still wrapped around his neck, her body completely pressed against him, unable to move, like a rabbit caught by someone, without any counterattack ability. After watching for a moment, Yun Shi suddenly released her, with an elusive smile on the corner of his mouth. "No problem, I just suddenly realized that Ah-E was so pleasing to the eye." Pei Yi's cheeks were slightly burned by his hot and profound gaze, and she instinctively tilted her head. As Yun Chen's expression softened, he couldn't help feeling a little surprised in his heart. Tong, what does the tyrant mean by this? Does he seem to like me very much? From yesterday until now, things have developed so smoothly that she always feels that something is not right, but she can't say it. The system shook its head in confusion and said, I don't know, is it because he already likes the original owner? The first encounter between the original owner and the tyrant was still very beautiful, which makes sense. Pei Yi pursed her lips and obediently nestled in his arms, watching him review the memorial. In the following days, except for the morning court, Pei Yi and the tyrant were almost inseparable, eating and sleeping together. She is like a canary carefully raised in a cage, everything except for lack of freedom is the best. The tyrant always looks lazy and indulgent in front of Pei Yi. She says whatever she says, almost never refutes, and is very indulgent towards her. I even listened to her words and reformed myself, never killing anyone again, and my reputation for cruelty gradually improved. After nearly half a month of peaceful coexistence, the male protagonist was ordered to guard the border and will not return to Beijing for at least 20 years. Pei Yi felt that the task should be almost completed, so she asked the system to submit the task and prepare to leave this world. Just as the system was about to press the confirm button, Yunchen suddenly rushed in with his sword in hand. He crazily gripped Pei Yi's wrist. Her eyes gradually turned red, and a cold light appeared in her eyes. Her murderous intent surged. I have spoiled you everywhere. Why did you choose to leave me? He held his sword and pressed her step by step, forcefully pulling her onto the bed. Her tall body completely enveloped her, with an extremely dangerous aura lingering around her. Pei Yi was stunned and said, Tongzi, he's so good. How did he suddenly become like this? The system is also at a loss. I don't know, his blackening value is about to explode. Host, come up with a solution. It was so anxious that its head grew bigger, and the previously stable data suddenly surged. It's really about to explode. Pei Yi quickly calmed down and looked at him with a bewildered and innocent expression as usual. Husband, what are you talking about? When did I say I was leaving? Haha. Yunchen suddenly let out a low laugh, his hoarse and deep voice as eerie and dangerous as a deadly cultivator. Didn't you say you wanted the system to take you away? The man's tone is gentle and calm, provided that he ignores the chill in his eyes that is about to turn into substance. Pei Yi. What? System. One person stands still at the same time, especially the system, with their mouth wide open. I'll go, what's the situation? How does he know about our relationship? The system immediately began to operate, and the crackling sound of the keyboard echoed incessantly in Pei Yi's mind. She was bewildered for a long time, and her eyes became increasingly gloomy. Why do you know all this? Yunchen threw away his long sword at some point, imprisoning her waist. His black eyes stared at her intently, and the smile at the corners of his mouth became more apparent, with a hint of danger between his eyebrows and eyes. He slowly bent down and sprayed all his warm breath on Pei Yi's face. His thin lips slightly closed and he said, the male protagonist on the plane. The villainous tyrant. Are you going to save the orphan? The tyrant spoke out a lot of conversations between Pei Yi and the system, which made her finally lose her composure. You know mind reading. Although it is absurd, this is currently the most reasonable explanation. She quickly asked the system, what the hell is going on? Did you give him a new finger? The system was also panicked and was so busy that it almost cramped. No, how could we possibly give the villain a golden finger? Pei Yi. Then how could he know about our affairs? System. How do I know? I'm so annoyed, probably there's a bug again. Pei Yi. What is also called? Good afternoon, babies. Finally, the contract has been successfully signed. Welcome to come and do the activity next Monday, end of this chapter. Chapter 4. Black Tyrant's Cage. Sparrow 4. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 4. Black Tyrant's cage. Sparrow 4. Yun Chen was displeased that her attention had been taken away by the so-called system, and he raised his hand to pinch her upper jaw, forcing her to look at him. Rather than asking it, it's better to ask the orphan. That's right. The parties involved are right here. Pei Yi immediately took off all his disguise and easily exchanged home positions with him. Tell me, when did you have mind-reading skills? Suddenly pressed under her, Yun Chen was stunned for a moment, wanting to retrieve the venue, but found that he couldn't get up at all. The originally fierce expression flashed with a hint of shock, and then I heard Pei Yi's inner voice. Let's face it, stop pretending, I'm actually very strong. I knew I wouldn't pretend to be good, it's so troublesome. Yun Chen didn't believe in evil and struggled a few more times, but still couldn't escape her control. Her originally calm face gradually became sinister and eerie. The blade-like gaze lingered on her face for a long time, and a cold and dangerous voice came out from his thin lips. Let go of loneliness. His voice was very cold, his eyes gradually turned red, and a chill seeped through his eyes, with a murderous intent rising. I thought everything was under my control, but the situation suddenly spiraled out of control, and the tyrant is now on the brink of rebellion. At the same time, a warning came from the system. The villain's blackening value is about to reach its peak. Host, please release him quickly. Ha! Despite being reluctant, Pei Yi still let go of Yun Chen and sat up next to him, his face very unhappy. It's rare to put it on, can't it please me to the fullest? Yun Chen lay down for a few seconds before sitting up. His clothes were slightly open, and his chest was faintly visible. He was like an enraged beast, staring at her intently. Sensing his gaze, Pei Yi instinctively muttered in her heart, why has he been staring at me all this time? He doesn't really want to kill me, does he? If I die, who will soothe him to sleep in the future? She was well aware of her importance to the tyrant, and even if she remembered his mind-reading skills, she did not restrain herself. Instead, he became even more determined. Tong, his chest muscles are so big, his figure must be very good. I didn't expect to sneak a few touches before, it's a pity. Her inner voice kept echoing, and Yun Chen's face became increasingly ugly, with the killing intent in his eyes almost turning into substance. If her gaze could kill, Pei Yi might have died 1,000 times already. Shut up. Yun Chen suddenly sneered coldly and raised his hand to lightly stroke Pei Yi's fair cheek. His cold light swept his pupils and his gaze softened as he stared at her. Since you came here alone, don't think of leaving easily, he said, if I find out you want to leave again, I have a way to deal with you. The tyrant is not foolish, he has long discovered the connection between himself and her. Even if she can't beat him, what if he dies, she won't think it's okay. Tisk. Pei Yi seemed to have guessed his meaning and asked the system in front of him, will I be punished if the tyrant dies? The system said without hesitation, of course, not only will it be punished, but it will also reincarnate in this world. We can't leave this world until the task is completed. Pei Yi. Upon hearing this, the tyrant laughed. Yun Chen's lips curved with a cruel smile, and his narrow pupils narrowed slightly, revealing the dark light of wild beasts hunting. Did you hear that? Why can't you be alone? In the past 20 years, he has never been as happy as he is now. Even if he doesn't love the woman in front of him, he feels incredibly happy because of her. That's great. A person who exists only for him. The tyrant's eyes gradually turned red, not because of his intentions, but because of happiness. He laughed very recklessly. Pei Yi looked up at him, not understanding why he had to smile like this. Okay, you're the villain. Just be happy. Pei Yi exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, got up to tidy up her clothes, stroked her luxurious and dazzling tassels on her head, and smiled calmly, it's only a few decades at most. It's not too late for me to leave again when you're dead in bed. After listening to these words, Yun Chen's face instantly darkened, and a dark and obscure light flickered in his pitch-black pupils. He knows almost nothing about her. The long decades of life seemed fleeting to her. What exactly has she experienced? Yun Chen followed and stood up, her tall figure instantly enveloping her. The soft expression in his eyes under his sword eyebrows said, "Can you tell me your real name, Gu?" Upon hearing this, Pei Yi turned around with a smile, her eyes streaming like scattered stars. "My name is Pei Yi." Pei Yi. The tyrant suddenly lowered his gaze and silently recited her name in his heart, gradually easing his previously gloomy face. "How about I continue to call you Yi? Of course you can. Yi. I'm here." Pei Yi looked up at his eyebrows and eyes, those black eyes as clear as usual, pure and pure, without any impurities. After staring at her for a moment, Yun Shi suddenly averted his gaze, pursed his thin lips, and his ears quietly turned red from an angle she couldn't see. The cold-faced tyrant, who had always been in the dark swamp, finally welcomed his own light. No matter what, he will always leave behind this hard-earned beam of light. When Yun Chen left, it was almost midnight. After he left, the guards outside suddenly changed. All were replaced by black-clad guards wearing masks, guarding her from 360 degrees without any blind spots. Pei Yi only opened a window and noticed at least 10 unfamiliar gazes. 6-inch. This is more terrifying than being a pervert monitoring others. She can only install dozens of surveillance cameras, but it's better for the tyrant to arrange hundreds of people to secretly monitor her. After an overnight investigation, the system finally found the source of the bug. Checked it out, the tyrant was awakened as a mind-reading technique on the day we came over. And then what? This was originally the golden finger of the female lead, but for some reason it ran onto the tyrant. So. Fortunately, the problem is not significant. The bug has been fixed and he can no longer hear your thoughts. Very good. Pei Yi's lips curved into a bright smile, feeling that the hundreds of dark guards outside were pleasing to the eye. When he saw her again in the evening, the tyrant found himself losing the ability to read his mind. His cold gaze instantly converged on Pei Yi's face, with dark pupils that exuded a bottomless darkness, making one inevitably feel fearful. Pei Yi calmly met his eyes, with a smile on his brows and eyes, fearlessly saying, "Look at what I'm doing, eat." In an instant, the jade chopsticks in Yun Chen's hand were forcefully crushed by him. I saw his eyebrows furrow tightly, his face cold and eerie, making it difficult to see what he was actually thinking. The palace attendant immediately replaced him with a pair of bowls and chopsticks, and as he approached, he was frightened by his powerful and penetrating aura, causing his body to tremble violently. I thought he would make a big fuss, but to my surprise, he remained silent until the dinner was over, which made Pei Yi a bit confused. Just as he was about to say something, Yun Chen suddenly showed her an extremely sinister and terrifying smile. Since that's the case, let's give the gift prepared by Gu Wei in advance. What gift? Pei Yi instinctively curled her lips, and a cloud of white smoke suddenly spread in front of her. She lost consciousness in an instant and fainted. The tyrant approached and picked her up, then turned around and walked towards the inner hall. For him, a wild sparrow is meant to be tied up with thin chains and locked up in a golden cage. Today's update is coming. The female lead was a bit slow in the early stages because she didn't have any emotional experience. QAQ, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 5. Pei Yi felt as if she was in chaos. She could hear the system calling out to her, but her eyelids were so heavy that she couldn't lift them. After an unknown amount of time, Pei Yi finally opened her eyes and a familiar blue color came into view. She was lost for a while, her mind a bit confused, and vaguely remembered that she had just finished dinner with the tyrant. Tyrant dinner. Just as I was about to think about something, my brain suddenly hurt. Immediately after, the system was filled with anxious sounds and suddenly sounded, "Host, you're quite awake. What's wrong?" Noticing that its tone was incorrect, Pei Yi was about to get up, only to find that her body was weak and powerless, as if she had been disabled, unable to even lift her fingers. Her breathing suddenly froze, and before the system could speak, her gaze instantly darkened. "Damn it, I was ambushed by the tyrant." Slowly exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Pei Yi's expression remained unusually calm. "Give me the antidote." Host, the sound of the system was noticeably weaker. "The tyrant said, if I dare to save you, he will die." Pei Yi. In fact, the tyrant's original words were, "If you dare to take action to save me, I will have someone pick out her tendons and feet. When she is tormented to the point of excruciating pain, I will personally take care of my life and leave you stranded in this world forever." When he said this, his expression was very terrifying, and the system hesitated. He could only wait for Pei Yi to wake up on his own. This is the long 3 days and 3 nights. Recalling Yunshi's cold and terrifying expression at the time, the system couldn't help but shudder. "He's just a lunatic. Host, you must not provoke him." Pei Yi. Her brain is still drowsy and her consciousness is extremely tired, unable to even speak. Undoubtedly, he is a dark villain. He is really ruthless in his actions. "It's okay, let it go with the flow." She sighed and closed, intending to continue sleeping. At this moment, a faint scent of dragon saliva suddenly appeared in the air, and soon a tall black-red figure slowly appeared in her sight. The tyrant lowered his eyes and looked at her sickly and beautiful little face with a playful expression. The voice was clear and cheerful. "Finally woke up, I thought Yi would sleep until tomorrow." He actually lay down by the bed, his handsome face almost touching Pei Yi's face, the corners of his lips slightly raised, and a smile filled his pupils, both bad and handsome. Yun Chen lifted his large hand with distinct joints, and his fingertips traced Pei Yi's eyebrows and eyes bit by bit. Unconsciously, his body leaned forward again, and the distance between the two was only a millimeter. In his gaze at Pei Yi, there was a subtle love entangled with a strong and extreme paranoia and possession. "Yi, don't try to escape, you will always be a lonely canary." Pei Yi was uncomfortable with his warm breath, wanting to dodge but unable to move, and could only watch him act on her. The tyrant's hand was like carrying magic, and the place he touched gradually became hot. He realized that things were getting worse and worse, and Pei Yi finally became angry. "I count to 3, quickly give me the antidote." "Coco is, With just one nasal sound, the system was immediately flustered and quickly detoxified her while repairing her body. Everyone was focused on other things, without even noticing the tyrant's increasingly mysterious and cold gaze. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes rolling in disbelief. The solitary mind-reading technique has returned. The originally calm heart was like being thrown into a stone, instantly causing layers of ripples. He quickly lowered his gaze with a strange color, and his lips always had a slight curve. With the recovery of her physical strength, Pei Yi finally realized that her wrists and ankles seemed to be bound by something. Without waiting for her to check, Yun Chen's deep and dangerous voice echoed from her side again. "This is a meteorite iron chain specially crafted for you by Gu. Even if you have extraordinary abilities, you can't escape." Pei Yi remained silent and secretly pulled off the chain, sneering coldly in her heart, "Just a meteorite chain, you want to trap me too?" She was about to exert force when the system quickly spoke up. "Host, are you crazy? This body has been raised extremely delicate by the tyrant, and forcefully grabbing and releasing it will waste both hands and legs." After listening to these words, Pei Yi felt no waves in her heart. "With you around, what are you afraid of? System." It choked silently and advised Pei Yi for a long time before temporarily dispelling the idea. Her attention was never focused on herself. Yun Chen's face, which had been neglected for a long time, had become extremely gloomy. Damn it! The tyrant suddenly pinched her jaw, forcing her to only look at him. The cold light flashed through his pupils and he said, "Don't ignore the existence of loneliness." He was very excited, his lips were trembling lightly, and he wanted to say something, but he swallowed it again. No way. The emergence of mind-reading techniques must not be revealed to her again. Only in this way, I am not completely ignorant of her. Pei Yi didn't react much. She instinctively blinked her eyes and then spoke softly, "Anyway, you're going to keep me locked up for a lifetime. Can't you still let me daydream?" The previous words from the system woke her up. The world was still in operation, and the plot could change at any time. It was better to stay and monitor the tyrant. Her words successfully choked Yun Chen for a moment, and he gradually withdrew his hand, staring at her with a complex expression. He looked at Pei Yi for a long time, as if he wanted to see some flaws in her face. After confirming that she had no intention of leaving, her furrowed eyebrows gradually relaxed, and a smile couldn't help but appear in her eyes. "Very good, I just like Yi's obedient appearance." Upon hearing this, Pei Yi curled her lips and sneered, "Oh, you just said you were very satisfied with my angry appearance." The chain was long enough to make her flip over, but she didn't know she had been exposed yet and still lay there honestly. Yun Chen. Unable to speak of her, the tyrant's face was clearly a bit irritable. After a cold snort, he shook his sleeves and left. As soon as he left, a group of palace attendants came in to wash and wipe her body, feed her water and food, and treat her like a useless person to serve. Pei Yi didn't reject it either, accepted it calmly, and would even flirt with good-looking palace maids if she had nothing to do. Unfortunately, they dare not even bother with her. Until she realized that all these palace attendants were deaf and mute, the thought of wanting to mess things up dissipated in an instant. There are so many deaf and mute people in this world, unless Pei Yi furrowed her brows into a Sichuan character, got up and sat up. Her gaze swept over the palace maids who were cleaning the dormitory, her expression complex. No, it can't go on like this anymore. She must always be by the tyrant's side and stop him from continuing to do evil. The system was worried that she might harm itself and cautiously asked, "Host, what do you want?" Pei Yi ignored it and said in a deep voice to the air, "Tell the tyrant that I want to see him." As the sound fell, a gust of evening breeze suddenly blew in from outside the window, and the bamboo shadows swayed, eventually returning to silence. In no time, Yun Chen walked in, with a smile on his face and a seemingly good mood. "Here's the update, dear friends. Happy May Day. QAQ The activity starts from Monday and ends every weekend after midnight. Only the top 3 on the activity list are allowed. Remember to join the group, babies." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 6. As he approached, Pei Yi slowly got off the bed. The thin chain is long enough for her to walk freely in the dormitory, but she cannot step out the door. She walked straight to the round table and sat down, pouring him a cup of tea with her own hands. "Let's have a sip of water first, Your Majesty." At the moment when Pei Yi lifted her eyes and met his gaze, there seemed to be an endless smile spreading in her eyes, as if a pearl had fainted and shone brilliantly. She looked at Yun Chen with both surprise and joy, sat down and took the teacup without saying a word. Those jet-black pupils looked at her without blinking. Yi and Gushing are separated. You used to call Gushing your husband. His voice is deep and scattered, neither sad nor happy, making it difficult to detect his true emotions. Pei Yi was taken aback for a moment, then started to smile and answered him with one hand supporting half of his face, "My identity used to be Yi Fei, but now I am not." Upon hearing this, Yun Chen's movement suddenly stopped, his eyes darkened, and the smile at the corner of his mouth abruptly came to an end. A cold and terrifying aura gradually spread. Seeing that he was about to get angry, Pei Yi quickly added, "If you like how I call you, then let's just do it from now on. Is that okay, husband?" Her eyes were as clear and bright as ever, her voice was soft, and her smile was bright and bright. Of course, it is necessary to ignore her constantly slandering inner self. The curve at the corner of Yun Chen's mouth became increasingly upward, and his narrow phoenix eyes narrowed slightly, shimmering with an indistinct water light. "I can't ask for it alone." Looking at him like this, Pei Yi felt like she had successfully smoothed her hair. So he took the initiative to walk up to Yun Chen and gently swayed his neck as if coquettishly. "Husband, you now know my identity and know that I will never leave you. Why don't you set me free and let me be by your side at any time? The feeling of being locked is really uncomfortable. Believe me, I will never run away." This was the first time she had been so attentive and obedient, and the tyrant was very useful, like a giant beast that felt so comfortable squinting its eyes when being groomed. Even though the appearance is extremely fierce, it still makes people feel soft and cute. Yun Chen raised his eyes and met her with a pleasing gaze. There seemed to be an endless smile spreading in his eyes, even more dazzling than the countless stars outside. Just when Pei Yi thought he was about to succeed, he finally spoke up. "Believe it or not, only by locking you in can you stay by my side forever." For some reason, the tyrant's tone was very stubborn, and his originally calm expression instantly became eerie and dangerous. He circled Pei Yi's waist and forced her to sit on his lap. His dark, ink-like eyes were filled with paranoia and madness. "From now on, whatever A wants, I will offer it with both hands, but freedom is not enough. Pei Yi. Take it. You kid, you're really not good at salt and oil." Her face instantly turned ugly, her fists clenched and creaked. As she was about to go berserk, the system quickly came out to smooth the situation. "Don't be impulsive, host, have you forgotten? The tyrant lacks love, and you are the only one who won't hurt him. According to convention, you are now a beam of light that illuminates his dark life. As long as you follow him everywhere, our task can be easily completed, can't you?" The system output a lot, but Pei Yi didn't listen to a single word. With a serious expression, he denied it and said, "What you said is too cliched. As a brave, scheming, and ambitious villain, he wouldn't be swayed by love. If anyone could light up his dark and tragic world, then he would be too foolish." System. It fell silent. Because this statement also makes a lot of sense. It is not easy for a tyrant to achieve what he is today. He may have long lost the desire to receive love from others. He is now the supreme emperor of Yen and the eternal emperor worshipped by hundreds of countries. How could such a person easily fall into the so-called love trap of redemption? One person, one unified, both fell into silence, without noticing the increasingly obscure and unclear expression on Yun Chen's face. Unfortunately, he is such a foolish person. After more than 20 years of sorrow, the tyrant's heart had already become numb, but unfortunately, at this moment, Pei Yi appeared. No hard-working person can resist this hard-won warmth. He is just an ordinary person and also yearns to have a happy and fulfilling life. With this thought in mind, Yun Chen's hand around her waist tightened even tighter, almost suffocating her. Pei Yi furrowed her eyebrows slightly, propping her hands on his chest, looking extremely dissatisfied and saying, "You're hurting me." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately began to curse inwardly. He is indeed a ruthless and heartless cruel tyrant, who has no understanding of cherishing fragrance and jade. Not obedient at all, no wonder he was punished by the male and female leads. Her abusive voice instantly caught Yun Chen's attention, and he stared into her eyes with no relaxation in his hand. "Pei Yi, are you really not going to leave Gu?" Pei Yi was taken aback for a moment, and her expression immediately became flattering and serious. Yes, as long as you don't restrict my freedom anymore, I will never leave you. You know, I've been here for you in this life. Don't be too lazy anymore, okay? Because of her words, Yun Chen's heartstrings were deeply touched, and his eyes exuded a tenderness and affection that even he himself had not noticed. It's just that. Just trust her once. The tyrant smiled and let go of her, while his well-defined big hand gently rubbed her waist and sincerely apologized. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used so much force earlier. Can you forgive me? Pei Yi. If you untie it for me, I will forgive you. Tyrant. Okay. In no time, a dark guard suddenly appeared, holding a silver key in both hands. Yun Chen picked up the key and quickly untied all the shackles on Pei Yi's body. The action was decisive, so fast that she had regained her freedom before even realizing it. Pei Yi. The system had a knock on its face and exclaimed excitedly, "Did you see the host? He really likes you." Pei Yi. System. Believe me, okay. Based on my experience with tens of thousands of romance novels, he must have fallen in love with you. Upon hearing these words, Pei Yi's eyes darkened slightly, but her mind remained very clear. She dismantled her own CP on the spot. It's impossible. At most, he thinks I'm quite special, but it's not enough to fall in love with me. In the original plot, there were countless women trying to save him by showing kindness to him. How could he have been attracted to me? Pei Yi kept denying the system's words one after another. System. You are the one who truly refuses to enter, right? Everyone was chatting seriously, but still didn't notice Yun Chen's hesitant expression. If he can be honest, if he really wants to go along with the system, he can directly confess his feelings to her. He admitted that he may not love her so much, but he definitely likes her. Yun Chen stared at her, and an indescribable emotion quickly spread in his deep eyes. The tyrant's inner OS. Lonely is just a love brain. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 7. Pei Yi was unaware of what the tyrant was thinking, and his seemingly affectionate expression concealed alienation and indifference, treating him only as a task. On the night she gained her freedom, someone who was not afraid of death spread the news. In just one night, the entire Yen capital became aware of her existence, as if a drop of water had splashed into the hot oil in the front and back palaces, boiling instantly. Upon learning the news from the dark guards, Yun Chen became furious and personally interrogated and killed hundreds of palace attendants. It was supposed to be a bright morning, but the atmosphere was extremely oppressive, and the nauseating smell of blood in the air persisted for a long time. There were rumors before that Pei Yi monopolized the holy pet, but later she suddenly disappeared and gradually people forgot about her existence. Now, she has become the target of public criticism, and people who want to approach her are like flies and mosquitoes, constantly flowing in. When Pei Yi was awakened by the system and arrived at the scene, the bodies of the palace members had already piled up in the front courtyard of the dormitory. Wherever he could see, there were shocking and terrifying scenes, and the smell of blood in the air made Pei Yi feel a bit nauseous. He forced himself to endure his nausea and walked out quickly. Cloud decay. I saw the tyrant standing tall and upright under the tree, his silver sword body stained with crimson, and blood slowly sliding down the blade. His clothes and face were covered in bloodstains, his eyes were cold and filled with a murderous intent, as terrifying as a hellish cultivator. Looking back at Pei Yi with a worried gaze, Yun Chen instinctively turned his head and lowered his gaze, a hint of guilt quickly passing through his eyes. Looking back again, his dangerous and terrifying aura suddenly diminished, his eyebrows furrowed slightly, and his eyes remained gloomy and eerie. His voice was low and slightly hoarse, and his gaze swept around him with a hint of anger. How did you wake up? He casually discarded the bloody long sword and tried to move forward, but suddenly stopped. Although the black and red clothes were not easy to highlight blood stains, they couldn't cover the smell of dried blood. He didn't want to approach her with such a body. So Yunchen said before Pei Yi spoke, "Wait a moment, Ronggu will go take a shower and change clothes first." Before he could finish speaking, he walked straight into the hall without giving Pei Yi a chance to speak. Upon seeing this scene, the system immediately shouted and exclaimed, "The tyrant definitely doesn't want to approach you in this image, host, he loves you so much." Pei Yi found a clean stool and sat down. What nonsense. He already has a cleanliness fetish. During her speech, dozens of black-clad guards appeared out of thin air and quickly dealt with the bloodstained scene. Among those palace attendants, there were still a few familiar faces, and Pei Yi couldn't help but feel a bit dazed. Although she had flirted with these people yesterday, she died here today. For a moment, her thoughts were a bit chaotic, and she finally realized how childish she had been before. The reason why a tyrant is called a tyrant is because he is extremely cruel and has no mercy. Leading him to the right path is not just about talking, it takes a long time to make him change. Pei Yi slowly closed her eyes, her mind constantly flashing the scene of corpses lying everywhere just now, and her eyebrows suddenly tightened. No, we can't let him continue to blacken out like this. I'm fine now. Just as she was in pain, Yun Chen's slightly hoarse voice suddenly came from behind. She lifted her eyes in response and met his calm and smiling handsome face. Pei Yi was stunned, recalling the cause of the matter. The word she had originally intended to persuade suddenly choked up in her throat. The tyrant's mouth curved slightly, and he walked slowly towards her with clear eyes, as if nothing had happened. Raising his hand and gently caressing Pei Yi's smooth and fair cheeks, he smiled calmly and said, "I just dealt with some sinners. Yi won't blame me, will he?" The smile on the corner of his mouth was very obvious, but he didn't smile into his eyes. His eyes were indifferent, even with a hint of killing intent. Pei Yi stared at him for a long time, with a dry throat and a calm voice questioning, "You only need to find the person who spread the rumors. Why do you still want to indiscriminately kill innocent people?" The tyrant also stared at her intently, his eyes fixed on a sinister expression. "I don't allow anyone with ulterior motives around you. I would rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go. This is his palace, guarded so tightly that someone could seize the opportunity to sneak in. If the means are not ruthless, how can we ensure the safety of him and her?" Yun Chen spoke out all he had in his heart, his palm imprisoning Pei Yi's shoulders, forcing her to look directly into his own eyes. Word by word, he said, "I am an emperor. There are countless pairs of eyes below me trying to find my weakness. I can have feelings for you, but not for others. A soft rib is enough." Upon seeing this scene, the system was so excited that it screamed out loud. "Did you hear the host? He said he has feelings for you." It's like CP fans getting so excited when they hear the main character admit it themselves. Pei Yi. She silently gazed at the tyrant, her face calm, and her eyes slightly surprised. "I've only known him for less than a month, why did he fall in love with me?" The system choked up and remained silent for a while before speaking again. "Is there a possibility that our department is here to give warmth to the villain? Isn't it a good thing that he can fall in love with you?" Pei Yi. Yes, the so-called rescue of the villainous department is not just to give them warmth, let them feel the beauty of the world, and thus coexist peacefully with the male and female protagonists. Pei Yi remained silent for a long time, so long that Yun Chen couldn't hear her voice anymore. He panicked for a moment and quickly said, "I won't do this again in the future." "Alright, don't be angry, alright." She felt a bit disorganized in her thoughts, and the urgent gaze of the tyrant seemed to touch her heart. Finally, he smiled at him and said, "I'm not angry." "That's what you said. If you continue to indiscriminately kill innocent people, I won't be by your side anymore." Pei Yi's voice was soft and gentle, speaking in the gentlest tone of the man in front of her with the most fearful words. Yun Chen was secretly delighted, his eyes instantly turned red, his tail slightly raised, and he nodded heavily, okay, as long as IE doesn't leave me, I can do anything for you. Pei Yi nodded lightly, glanced at the sky, and urged him to hurry to the morning court. After he left, Pei Yi still felt a bit uneasy. She asked the system to closely monitor his actions and notify her immediately if there were any abnormalities. As it was still early, she was preparing to catch some sleep when she lay down and felt a slight chill at her fingertips. Pei Yi immediately sat up, her eyelashes trembling slightly, and slowly took out what was inside the blanket. It's a letter, and it's in the handwriting of the male lead Shi Changqing. She quickly glanced around and lay down again, completely tucked under the blanket, slowly opening the letter. The letter said that Shi Changqing had already known the truth about her amnesia, and was furious to find out that she was willing to poison herself in order to leave the palace. She wanted to send someone back to the capital to rescue her. After reading the content, Pei Yi immediately lit and destroyed the letter, and his gaze scanned every place around him where people could hide. The entire palace is guarded tightly by the dark guards of Yun Rui. How did this letter get to her bed? Explain why IE doesn't believe the tyrant likes her. Firstly, she has always been listened to by the tyrant, knowing everything she says and does beforehand, just like a funny clown. Secondly, the tyrant was a ruthless and decisive emperor to her, and it was impossible for him to be so easily attracted to her. Finally, IE has a strong learning ability, and once she discovers her male lead identity, she becomes enlightened. Good evening, babies. If you have nothing to do, could you please give me a 5-star review? It's really an important QAQ. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. The Caged Sparrow of the Black Tyrant 8. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 8. The Caged Sparrow of the Black Tyrant 8. Until the end of the morning court, Pei Yi did not find any suspicious people. To be precise, she was the only one visible in the entire palace, and the rest were arranged by the tyrant as secret guards. There must be a very close relationship between the rumor and the messenger. As the tyrant was about to return, Pei Yi stood up to tidy up. Among the vast imperial palace, the most indispensable one is the palace attendants. Due to this morning's incident, everyone in the palace was in a state of panic, afraid that one person who didn't pay attention would be killed by the tyrant with a sword. When serving the dishes, the palace maids were all trembling, their faces pale, and even their breathing was cautious. Pei Yi became annoyed and asked them all to go out and wait. All the palace attendants retreated with tears in their eyes as if they had seen the savior. After they left, Pei Yi's appetite gradually regained, and before Yun Chen could wait, he started eating with his chopsticks. She was diligently cooking, while the tyrant was listening to her innermost thoughts. When he learned that someone was secretly delivering a letter to her, a fierce look flashed across his eyes. How unreasonable! Which thief dares to be so bold? Surprisingly, he made some small moves under the watchful eyes of a lonely person. The jade chopsticks in Yun Chen's hand were almost crushed by him, but he could only pretend not to know anything. He raised his hand and put a piece of meat into Pei Yi's bowl, saying, "Ah, you are too thin. Eat more meat to supplement your shape." Pei Yi looked up at him and nodded lightly, "Thank you, but I prefer to do it myself." Yun Chen said, "Okay." He rolled his Adam's apple twice, his eyelashes trembled lightly, his hands slowly clenched, and he ate silently. The sound of Pei Yi talking to the system kept ringing in his mind. System. After my investigation, the male lead and female lead have already met. The female lead Sun Yun has a deep cunning mind and has been stirring up the relationship between the male lead and the tyrant, intending to incite him to rebel. Pei Yi, ha. Her hands, busy with cooking, suddenly stiffened, and her eyebrows furrowed slightly. Jianghua is in the south, and the male lead is in the west. How can they still intersect at such a distant distance? System. Both the male and female protagonists are chosen by the heavens, and fate will always arrange for them to meet. Pei Yi. Initially, it was to dismantle them that Pei Yi had the tyrant dispatch him to the border, and he was not allowed to return to the capital without an edict. Can't resist the plot arrangement. The female protagonist Sun Yunmiao is the most inconspicuous legitimate princess of the Jiang kingdom. After accidentally falling into the water, her body was occupied by the soul of a later daughter, commonly known as the crossing girl. The time-traveling woman was ambitious, secretly killing her brother and killing her younger brother. After a series of conspiracies and schemes, she became the empress. Little Jiang kingdom could not satisfy her ambition, so she set her sights on the most powerful country, Yan kingdom. The male and female protagonists were supposed to meet in the third month after the original protagonist's death, but due to Pei Yi's interference, they were moved forward. Realizing that she had done something foolish, Pei Yi suddenly lost her appetite and found her food tasteless, so she put down her chopsticks and said, "Tongzi, where has Sun Yunmiao gone now?" The system looked at the information in front of it and replied, "The female protagonist is a bookworm and knows the plot of the plane. Although far from the border of Yan, her people have secretly conspired to assassinate the right-hand man of Prince Jiang, and her next target is the 13th prince of Jiang. Sun Yunmiao was born by the late empress of Jiang state and is not well received. She has almost no presence in the palace, which is most conducive to her pretending to be a pig and eating a tiger, secretly cultivating her power. Therefore, even if she is not in the palace, no one will care." The emperor of Jiang had many descendants, and Jiang advocated male superiority and female inferiority. Without strategic planning, she was unable to ascend to the throne. Therefore, she set her sights on Shi Chongqing, the commander of the escort flag in Yan. In the original plot, Shi Chongqing hated the tyrant because his precious sister died tragically in the palace. When Sun Yunmiao threw an olive branch at him, he agreed without hesitation. Shi Chongqing devoted all her efforts to help her achieve her goals, ultimately seeking revenge and making a lifelong commitment to Sun Yunmiao. Before finishing his meal, Yun Chen suddenly stood up with a calm expression on his face and a slightly hoarse voice. "I'm full now. There are quite a few things to attend to in the court today. Please enjoy it slowly." Pei Yi smiled without hesitation and said, "Okay, husband, take your time." He looked at her and gritted his teeth in secret, brushing his sleeves and leaving the dormitory. After watching the tyrant leave, Pei Yi took a deep breath and swept the table full of food alone, leaving the system dumbfounded. After eating and drinking enough, Pei Yi returned to a delicate and beautiful state, elegantly wiping the corners of her mouth. Full, go out for a walk. System. My silence is deafening. Whose host can eat so much? Prior to this, the tyrant used the excuse that her body had not yet fully recovered to prevent Pei Yi from leaving, so this was her first time stepping out of the palace gate. The harem was large, but there were not many people, only 3 or 5 concubines scattered. Don't ask, the question is that they tried to seduce the tyrant but were all killed by him with their own hands. The few who have survived to this day are all the little transparent ones in the harem, never seeking divine favor, only wanting to survive until old age. Yun Chen never set foot in the harem, so except for his own dormitory, the rest of the place seemed deserted and looked very desolate. Not long after coming out, Pei Yi felt bored and prepared to return the same way. At this moment, she accidentally caught a glimpse of a figure and looked around, trying to shake off the guards responsible for protecting her. She stood behind a remote rockery, her expression calm and composed. "Come out." Not long after, a woman dressed in palace-made attire appeared behind her. She didn't speak and quickly handed Pei Yi a note before leaving. Pei Yi opened the note to check the content, which was still in Shi Chongqing's handwriting. "My sister Changyi, I will see you tonight at midnight in the backyard of Wuji Palace." She instinctively kneaded the note into a ball and forcefully stuffed it into the crevice of the rockery, her face dark and obscure. The female lead really had some skills, so she fooled the male lead back to Beijing. General Zhenbian is not allowed to summon anyone to return to the capital without authorization, as this is a serious crime of even executing the 9 tribes. No, we can't let her plan succeed. Pei Yi lifted her skirt and prepared to leave here. Unexpectedly, just as she walked out of the rockery, she saw Yunchen walking over with a bunch of people. She was surprised at first, without any guilt, and she was frankly angry with the tyrant. Don't misunderstand me, I'm just lost, and I'm just going to find a way back. Pei Yi had a delicate expression on her face, and she lovingly grabbed his palm, gently stroking him while also touching his feet to kiss him. His expression, which was originally full of anger, gradually softened as he held on to her and turned to leave. On the way, he remained silent. If it weren't for the cold and solemn aura lingering around him, Pei Yi would have thought he was fine. After returning, without waiting for the tyrant to speak, Pei Yi directly confessed what had happened today. She was very straightforward and said everything she could. Yun Chen stood by the window, his backlight fixed on her, his cold face shining with sharp edges. His pupils suddenly contracted, and his lips curved slightly. You are quite honest. Aren't you afraid that I will order the arrest of Shi Changqing? What she said was almost identical to what he had previously overheard. The tyrant lazily leaned against the window, in the twilight, adorned with dark red palace attire embroidered with dragon patterns, shining with golden light, exuding a fierce and arrogant aura that was not to be seen directly. The activity details and dress number have been placed at the top of the comments section. Remember to go and see them, dear friends. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. The Caged Sparrow of the Black Tyrant 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. The Caged Sparrow of the Black Tyrant 9, you won't know it. Pei Yi looked at him confidently and shook his head. The current situation in Yen State is not good. In the past 2 years, Yun Chen has governed the country very well, but he still cannot curb the ambitions of other countries, and there are still corrupt insects in the court that cannot be eradicated. Even if he has the ability to handle both internal and external troubles at the same time. Shi Changqing is known as the god of war of the Yen State, and his reputation alone is enough to intimidate those ambitious individuals. Yun Chen is a tyrant, not a foolish one. Apart from his unpredictable temperament and unpredictable moods, he is impeccable. Pei Yi stood in the shadow, holding his head high and facing his black eyes, saying, "You don't want to see a situation of external worries and internal troubles, so you will definitely not take action against him." That's also why the original owner was so angry the night he committed suicide. The tyrant was originally the son of a palace maid. If it weren't for the imminent downfall of the Yen kingdom at that time, how could he have successfully killed his father and usurped the throne? His cruel and selfless methods of governing the court have aroused the fear of countless people, and to this day, there are not many trusted confidants under his command. After listening to her inner voice, Yun Chen's eyebrows became even tighter. He didn't expect her to know him so well. He felt more and more like a skinned sheep, letting her slaughter him. Even though he knew she wouldn't harm him, he couldn't help feeling frustrated in his heart. Yun Chen stared at her in a daze, his black eyes churning with complex and indescribable happiness. Fortunately, she came to save the orphan. The tyrant breathed a sigh of relief and curled up his hands hidden in his wide sleeves, staring at her and asking, "What do you want to do?" Pei Yi walked out of the shadow and raised her hand to hook his neck. Her eyes were streaming with an indescribable tenderness, saying, "I have my own plans, just watch the play with my husband." She was suddenly so shocked that Yun Chen's body trembled violently. Her ears instantly turned red, and the next second she took the opportunity to grab her into her arms. She gently pinched her chin and raised the corner of her lips, saying, "Okay, I'll just wait and see." Looking at his flushed ears, Pei Yi's smile grew even worse, and she quickly pushed him away with a look of disinterest in him. "It's getting late, it's time for dinner." Yun Chen. The system that thought it could continue to use sugar. No, that's it. Pei Yi. Otherwise. System. Shouldn't the next screen be even more exciting? Pei Yi. What do you think? I just don't want to face the sunshine directly. System. 6. Such an ambiguous posture, you just want to shade yourself. Similarly speechless was Yun Chen. He had already been mentally prepared, but unexpectedly, she pushed him away in the next second. What is this called, a heartless woman? At the dinner table, the tyrant's face was extremely ugly, emitting a nearly 0-degree cold air from all over his body. The already cool hall suddenly entered winter, making people tremble with the cold. But Pei Yi seemed to have not noticed, eating very well, not even looking at him. The current tyrant is like an angry cat, waiting for its owner to come and comfort Shunmao. Seeing this scene, the system's mouth was twisted with anger. Host, did you quit D in your previous life? You can tolerate it so much. Look at the angry and pleading expression of the tyrant, why don't you quickly hug and hold him high? I'm so angry. Ah. Pei Yi paused slightly as she ate and answered it seriously, how do you know that I quit D in my previous life? Did 0124 tell you? 0124 is the system before Pei Yi. System. It choked silently for a few seconds and then asked, what was your last task? Pei Yi. Ring D for the original master, and then avenge her. System. Don't be too outrageous. Pei Yi said, my previous mission was either to seek revenge or to humiliate scumbags. I never engaged in meaningless things like love. After listening to her frank speech, the system finally understood why she was so puzzled by the charm. Glancing at the tyrant next to him, Pei Yi continued, if it weren't for the senior being abducted, I wouldn't have taken over your mess. System. Its previous host, who fell in love with the male protagonist of the plane and attempted to replace the female protagonist, was forcibly erased by superiors. Pei Yi had some friendship with her, and it was only after completing all the tasks that he took over her system and continued working. At this point, the system is completely speechless, so it's better to go offline and stop talking. At the same time, the tyrant was still digesting what he had heard, seeing her complex and gloomy expression. Sensing his gaze, Pei Yi instinctively looked up and said, what's wrong? Yun Chen immediately regained his senses and gently shook his head, saying, nothing. Pei Yi looked at him suspiciously and said, really? Yun Chen said, well, I've never seen a woman as peculiar as you before. I feel a bit surprised. Pei Yi quickly withdrew her gaze and didn't speak again, but a hint of laughter spread in her eyes. As night falls, the mysterious moon outside the palace is like a hook, with countless stars and rustling tree tops. The gentle breeze sweeps away the remaining leaves and gently falls. In order to cooperate with Pei Yi's plan, Yun Chen was forced to stay overnight in the imperial study. Finally, Pei Yi was so tired that his eyelids began to fight. Just as she was drowsy, a loud noise came from somewhere, and then she felt countless gusts of strong wind passing by. She blinked her eyes and quickly got up to go to the more remote backyard. On the road, there was only moonlight guiding the way, and Pei Yi ran along the way, almost falling several times, which frightened the dark guards and almost exposed them. When she walked through the corridor to the backyard, Shi Changqing had already been waiting there. Beside him, there was a tall and handsome beauty. Pei Yi stopped in place and looked at them straight, his eyebrows furrowed, and he said, I wonder why my elder brother is so bold. It turns out he was all influenced by people. Her tone was calm with a hint of anger, and her tone of voice was almost identical to that of the original owner. Shi Changqing was stunned and looked at her in disbelief, saying, Changyi, have you regained your memory? That's right. Pei Yi nodded at him and casually turned his gaze to Sun Yinmiao. Who is this? Why did brother resist the order and return to Beijing? Shi Changqing's eyes turned red in an instant and he stepped forward, carefully examining her under the moonlight. It doesn't matter who she is, Changyi, have you been doing well in the palace lately? Upon hearing these words, Sun Yunmiao's face visibly turned black, but she still spoke to her with a friendly smile, I am your brother's close friend. Just call me Yunmiao sister, Chinese sister. She was deliberately trying to please Pei Yi. Although she didn't know why she was still alive, Shi Changqing only had one weakness, her sister, and she had to establish a good relationship with her. Faced with her sparkling gaze, Pei Yi remained expressionless and casually glanced at her, his voice becoming slightly cold. I'm talking to my older brother, what's the connection with this girl? After finishing speaking, she continued to say to Shi Changqing, Your Majesty is not in the Wuji Palace today. If brother sets off immediately, I will pretend that nothing has happened. Wait. Shi Changqing quickly grabbed her as she was about to leave. Brother, I heard that you lost your memory because you poisoned yourself. Is this really true? Sun Yunmiao stood in front of her with a caring expression, Sister Changyi, don't be afraid. As long as you think, your brother and I can definitely take you out of here. Pei Yi. Man, it will only affect my speed of drawing my sword. Good evening, my dear friends Wu. It seems like there aren't many people QAQ today, end of this chapter. Chapter 10. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Black Tyrant's Cage Sparrow 10. Although Sun Yunmiao did not report her family background, her confidence in her eyes was so obvious that she couldn't even cover the darkness. Shi Changqing also agreed, yes, Changyi, tell your brother truthfully what happened. As long as you want, even if you risk your life, my elder brother will take you safely away. The Shi family has been generals for generations, all of whom were loyal soldiers who died in battle, so their population is sparse, leaving only their siblings. They spoke one by one, very passionately and indignantly, as if they had already memorized her pain. Pei Yi looked at them with a deep gaze, raised his hand to play with his long hair blown by the wind, and sneered, Brother, when did I say I wanted to leave the palace, your majesty? She stepped forward and stood between them, lifting her chin, looking up at Shi Changqing with concern. Word by word, he said, I hope you don't be deceived by others, become traitors, and bring shame to the loyal members of the Shi family. Pei Yi's meaning is already very clear. If Shi Changqing still doesn't understand, it would be really impolite. He was taken aback for a moment, then quickly glanced at Sun Yunmiao and then at her, with a suspicious expression and a slight confusion. Changyi, since you voluntarily stayed in the palace, why did you take poison and commit suicide at that time? For this question, Pei Yi just smiled lightly, his face full of self-deprecation. Because I had a conflict with your majesty and couldn't get angry for a moment, I did something foolish. I didn't expect that poison to be so powerful. It almost killed me and made me temporarily lose my memory. She answered perfectly, the original owner was originally a tough person and could indeed do such a thing. Shi Changqing's expression became extremely complex, with a slightly distorted expression. He looked up at Sun Yunmiao and coldly questioned, Miss Sun, didn't you say that my sister is very resistant to the palace and your majesty? He looked at her with a cold and terrifying gaze, his thin lips pursed a hint of coldness, not as kind as before. Recalling all the things he had done on the border before, Shi Changqing's eyes became even colder. He pulled Pei Yi behind him to protect her, his sharp eyes fixed on her like eagles and falcons. Sun Yunmiao's face suddenly froze, and he quickly took out a stack of envelopes from his sleeve, all of which were reported to her by her eyeliner in the palace. Brother Changqing, if you don't believe it, you can read these letters again. She tried to forcefully push the envelope into Shi Changqing's hand, but he protected Pei Yi and avoided her. Her eyes were filled with coldness and she said, Sun Yunmiao, who the hell are you? He was eager to protect his sister before, and after seeing the so-called evidence, he decisively followed her back to Beijing, forgetting to delve into why she had these letters. Looking back now, I'm afraid I've really been deceived by this woman. Shi Changqing's face became increasingly gloomy and ugly, as she only had a short dagger on her body, unable to fight against Pei Yi while protecting her. At the same time, Sun Yunmiao also calmed down, her handsome face full of anger. Shi Changqing, I approached you with a purpose, but all this evidence is true. Shi Changyi is lying to you. She doesn't even like tyrants and doesn't want to be bound in this desolate palace. Due to the surrounding dark guards, Sun Yunmiao could only lower her voice and growl at him with gritted teeth. Her expression of hatred towards iron and steel made Pei Yi feel a bit embarrassed. Pei Yi hid behind Shi Changqing, blinking innocently and saying, "No, your majesty and I have always been very kind. Your majesty has treated me extremely well. How could I not like him and not want to stay by his side?" Even before she arrived, the tyrant had been extremely indulgent towards the original owner, knowing that she had a close relationship with her brother, and allowed Shi Changqing to occasionally visit the palace as an exception. This is something that palace concubines have never had before, and for hundreds of years, she has been the only one. Shi Changqing became more and more convinced that he had been deceived by her, his face becoming increasingly gloomy and dangerous, and his eyes showing a pressing sense of oppression. Sun Yunmiao, let me ask you again, who are you and what is your intention to approach me? In an instant, he had already drawn his dagger, intending to capture her here. Sun Yunmiao's lightness skills are excellent, otherwise she wouldn't be able to easily enter the palace. She had a mocking and disappointed smile on her face, shaking her head in an indescribable tone. You're so foolish. You're a brain worthy of being the male lead. She murmured in a low voice with a smile on her face, leaving Shi Changqing confused. She roared in a low voice, since you are toasting and not accepting punishment, then don't blame me for turning my face and not recognizing anyone. After speaking, he planned to take action, but a group of dark shadows rushed ahead of him. Sun Yunmiao's face suddenly changed, realizing that she had been exposed. She dropped a smoke bomb and disappeared into the darkness. The dark guards quickly chased after him, and Yun Chen walked out casually. Seeing him slowly approaching under the candlelight, Shi Changqing's eyes widened and he quickly knelt down. Sinning Minister Shi Changqing, I have seen your majesty. Yun Chen stood in front of him, twirled his fingertips, and his eyes turned cold. Shi Changqing, you have disappointed me so much. He hid in the dark and understood the reasons behind the situation, so he gave Pei Yi a fierce glare before continuing to say to Shi Changqing, you know, not being summoned to leave the station without permission is a capital offense. Upon hearing these words, Shi Changqing buried his head lower, his eyes slightly red, and responded in a hoarse voice, I understand, and I request your majesty to surrender. He has completely calmed down now, knowing that he has committed a serious crime, and is no longer extravagant in seeking justice from Yun Chen. He is not afraid of death, his only concern is Pei Yi. Thinking of this, Shi Changqing suppressed his tears and kowtowed 3 times. The guilty minister suspects that Sun Yunmiao is an enemy spy. I hope your majesty can arrest her and execute her again. He is not afraid of death, but he is afraid that Pei Yi will be implicated after his own death, so he wants to bear the blame and make contributions, at least to ensure her safety for the rest of her life. Upon seeing this scene, the system was already deeply moved and exclaimed, what kind of top-tier girl control is this? What a pity it is to die. Why are all these good brothers from someone else's family? Pei Yi pursed her lips and knelt beside Shi Changqing, tears already welling up in her eyes. Your Majesty, my elder brother was deceived by thieves and thought that my concubine was not doing well in the palace. That's why I resisted the order and returned to the capital, she said, ultimately, it's all my concubine's fault. If your majesty wants to punish me, just punish me. Brother is innocent. Changyi. Shi Changqing dared not stand up and could only shout her name with tears in her eyes. Although I couldn't look up, I saw the growing tear pits on the ground, and my heart was as painful as a knife, with extreme regret. He felt a deep pain in his heart, and his desire to cut Sun Yunmiao to pieces grew stronger and stronger, to the point where the system sensed his emotional fluctuations. System. Oh my goodness, the male lead's blackening value is skyrocketing, and he really wants to kill the female lead. What kind of magical plot is this? Ah ah. Pei Yi's eyes instantly showed a hint of cunning laughter, but he still pretended to be pitiful and looked sorrowful, begging for punishment from the tyrant. With tears in his eyes, he met the tyrant's deep and indifferent gaze, crying so bitterly that I still felt pity upon seeing him. The tyrant's inner OS. How could you cry so bitterly for Shi Chongqing? You're so alone. End of this chapter.